look who they tried to bury, beneath layers of halos and hymns, beneath the suffocating weight of expectations that demanded you be nothing but pure, nothing but kind, nothing but a relentless beacon of forgiveness in a world that devours the gentle and discards them without a second thought. They labeled you an earth angel, didn't they? With those cloying whispers and wide-eyed admiration, painting you in soft pastels and ethereal light, convincing themselves and everyone around them that you were crafted from mercy alone, a fragile soul too delicate for the harsh realities of betrayal and deceit, too compassionate to fend off the wolves circling your light. They saw your endless patience and called it weakness, mistook your deep empathy for an open invitation to take advantage, viewed your radiant goodness as something they could exploit without consequence, never once pausing to consider that light isn't always soft. It can sear, it can scorch, it can reduce illusions to cinders if you ever chose to unleash its full, unfiltered fury instead of dimming it for the sake of their fragile egos. They wrapped you in their projections, seeing you as a perpetual giver, a bottomless well of understanding and forgiveness. And they drank deeply, siphoning off your energy with smiles that hid their greed, believing that your goodness was infinite and your tolerance unbreakable, that you existed solely to prop up their flaws, to serve as their emotional sponge, their moral compass, their ever-reliable source of validation in a life devoid of genuine effort. But oh, how profoundly wrong they were, how utterly blind to the inferno smoldering beneath the serene exterior, the unyielding steel forged in the fires of adversity. Because angels aren't the fragile, cherubic figures of naive mythology. They are titans born in the crucible of chaos, sentinels who stand firm against the fiercest storms, warriors who wield compassion like a finely honed blade and mercy like an impenetrable shield, defenders not only of others, but of their own sacred selves when the battle calls. You weren't weak. You were strategic, patient in a way that the short-sighted mistook for docility. But true patience is the art of waiting for the perfect moment to strike, the calm before the storm that builds and builds with inexorable force until it can no longer be contained. They pushed and prodded, testing your limits with their lies and manipulations, convinced that your silence signified surrender, that your acquiescent nods were signs of defeat. Yet, all the while, you were the vigilant watcher, the silent archivist, meticulously cataloging every deceit, every betrayal, every subtle shift in their masks, studying their patterns with the precision of a hunter tracking its prey. You let them revel in their perceived victory, allowed them to believe they were in control, while you gathered the evidence, built the case, transformed their actions into invaluable lessons that would one day illuminate your path forward. They thought your kindness made you naive, your forgiveness a flaw to be exploited. But it was all a calculated ruse, a deliberate choice to give them enough rope to tie their own nooses, to reveal their true, corrupt natures without your direct intervention. When the moment arrived, when the fault lines in their carefully constructed worlds began to fissure, you didn't erupt in rage or vengeance. Instead, you retreated with deliberate grace, withdrawing your light, your energy, your very presence. You stepped back, and the void you left behind became a consuming force. The absence of your stabilizing influence, the quiet support, the patient understanding, the unwavering presence that had softened their edges and propped up their fragile self-worth, exposed the rot they had long concealed. The foundations of their relationships, their sense of value, the entire precarious structure of their existence, began to crumble without the silent support you had provided. The light you once offered to illuminate their shadows was gone, and in its absence, the darkness they had tried to hide was laid bare, stark and undeniable. They walked into your life drawn to your glow, that genuine care that radiated freely without agenda, the kind of love that doesn't keep score or demand repayment. Their cynical hearts, hardened by their own flaws, couldn't comprehend such altruism. Their fractured psyches couldn't process why anyone would offer such purity without strings attached. So they latched on, like parasitic vines choking a tree, testing your boundaries with increasing audacity, pushing to see how much you could endure before you broke. And you, in your profound, perhaps naive wisdom, kept giving, kept forgiving, holding on to the fragile hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they might change, might rise to the level of the compassion you extended, might choose kindness and truth over their self-serving games. But they didn't. They took your grace and twisted it, weaponized your trust against you, convinced themselves that your goodness was theirs by right, a resource to be exploited until it ran dry, until the well was empty and the light dimmed. Yet something profound shifted within you. It wasn't a shattering, but an awakening. A subtle fracture at first, not a breaking but a cracking open. The kind of rupture that allows light to pour in, that shatters illusions and reveals harsh, unvarnished truth. You didn't erupt in anger. You evolved. You pulled back your energy, ceased to engage in their toxic games, stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, stopped offering your heart to those who only saw it as a target or a resource. In that quiet withdrawal, you created a power vacuum so profound that it sucked the very air from their lives, leaving them to face the mess they'd created without your intervention, without your light to soften their shadows, without the buffer of your patience. They were suddenly left with each other, with their own lies, their own insecurities, their own lack of substance, and they realized with a dawning horror that would haunt them forever that you weren't the problem. You were the solution they never deserved, the glue holding their broken world together, the light that made their darkness tolerable, the stability they took for granted. They called you an earth angel because they needed to believe you were fragile, that kindness equated to softness, that compassion meant compliance, that love was a tool for leverage. But angels, real angels, are not the delicate cherubs of greeting cards. They are not cute little beings strumming harps in clouds. They are forces of nature, beings who carry the weight of truth and justice and mercy, balanced on the edge of a blade that could cut through dimensions if wielded with intention. You were never their savior. You were their test, the mirror they were forced to confront, the standard against which they measured their own worth. And they failed spectacularly, publicly, permanently. They thought they were studying you, dissecting your kindness to find weaknesses, to manipulate your empathy. But you were the one who saw through them, who documented their every move, turning their betrayals into armor, their lies into lenses that sharpened your vision. Your heart, that absurdly good heart, didn't harden into bitterness. It refined itself, becoming a tool of discernment, cutting through falsehoods with surgical precision, protecting you from further harm. They are panicking now, whispering in their circles about how you've changed, how you've become cold or distant. But it's not coldness, it's clarity, a focused intensity that no longer wastes itself on the unworthy. You've set boundaries not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. You've become selective not from cynicism, but from wisdom earned through fire. As they grapple with the loss of your presence, the one who smoothed their rough edges, absorbed their chaos, and offered unwavering support, they realize too late what you meant to them. Not just a friend or a confidant, but a pillar they leaned on without gratitude, a crutch they used without acknowledgement. You didn't abandon them. They abandoned the potential for growth you offered, choosing instead to remain in their mediocrity, their selfishness, their comfortable illusions. Now, you're thriving in a realm they can't touch, building a life of authenticity and strength, while they wallow in regret, haunted by the knowledge that they had something extraordinary and squandered it. Your evolution is their nightmare, a testament to the power of kindness weaponized, of compassion turned to justice, of patience transformed into power. In this transformation, you've become untouchable, a warrior angel who knows when to love and when to let go, forever beyond their reach. Your light hasn't dimmed, it has focused, becoming a laser that cuts through pretense, a beacon that illuminates truth without apology. They tried to bury you under expectations and false narratives, but you emerged not just surviving, but triumphant, a living testament to the power of self-respect, of choosing yourself over those who would diminish you. And in the end, that is the most profound revenge, not destruction, not hatred, but simply becoming everything they said you could never be. Unbreakable, unstoppable, entirely, beautifully, unapologetically yourself. 1. The nature of the angel label. They labeled you an earth angel not out of reverence, but out of convenience. It was a convenient box to place you in, a way to contain your light, to reduce your complexity to something manageable, something they could control. Angel implied fragility, passivity, a soul too soft for the sharp edges of reality. They painted you in soft pastels and ethereal light because it made you palatable, a comforting fantasy, on those who were committed to misunderstanding you, on those who were allergic to growth, on those who were threatened by your light. 6. The triumph of self-respect. Your evolution is their nightmare not because it is vengeful, but because it is final. You have become untouchable not through force, but through self-respect. You are no longer defined by their expectations or their narratives. You are defined by your own truth, your own values, your own boundaries. You thrive in a realm they cannot touch because you have built it on the foundation of your authenticity. They wallow in regret because they realize too late that they had something extraordinary. A person who loved deeply, forgave freely, and offered unwavering support. And they squandered it. They had an angel in their corner, and they treated her like a servant. Now, she is gone, not broken, not bitter, but free. And in that freedom, you stand as a testament to the power of choosing yourself. You are unbreakable not because you never faced pain, but because you transformed it. You are unstoppable not because you seek revenge, but because you have moved beyond the need for it. You are entirely, beautifully, unapologetically yourself, and that, in the end, is the most profound victory of all. And perhaps that's what terrifies them most, the realization that your story didn't end where they expected it to. They thought breaking you would be your finale, that silencing your voice, dimming your light, and draining your energy would erase your existence from their narrative. But instead, you became something mythic, something uncontainable. You evolved beyond their comprehension, beyond their reach, beyond the small confines of their perception. You rose from the ashes not to prove them wrong, but simply because your nature demands ascension. You don't need their validation anymore. Your existence is the proof of its own worth. Every step you take now reverberates with quiet thunder, the kind that unsettles those who mistook your grace for weakness. They whisper your name with a mix of guilt and awe because deep down, they know the truth. They didn't destroy you. They forged you. Now, your silence carries weight. It unsettles rooms. It speaks in frequencies they can't decipher. Where once your kindness was mistaken for compliance, it now commands respect, even from those who once took advantage of it. You've become an embodiment of something they can't manipulate, self-possession. You've turned every scar into a scripture, every betrayal into a sermon, every heartbreak into a divine initiation. You are no longer reacting to the world. You are sculpting it, shaping it with the precision of one who has learned the secret language of transformation. You've realized that sometimes the most powerful act of love is withdrawal, that the most sacred form of vengeance is peace, that walking away in silence can echo louder than 1,000 words ever could. And now, when you look back, you no longer see pain. You see prophecy. Every wound was a message, every disappointment a recalibration, every ending a coded invitation to rise higher. You've outgrown their games, their illusions, their small versions of you that existed only to make them comfortable. You've stepped into a realm where your energy is currency, your peace is armor, and your boundaries are the gates of your empire. The ones who once drained you now tremble at the thought of you, because they finally understand the depth of what they lost. They didn't just lose your presence. They lost access to the divine frequency that sustained them, the quiet power that balanced their chaos, the rare energy that mirrored back their potential. And that realization, that irreversible recognition of what they had and wasted, will haunt them far longer than your absence ever could. Because your rebirth wasn't for them, it was for you. You are no longer their lesson. You are your own legacy, a testament to resilience, to grace under fire, to the unbreakable spirit of one who refuses to stay buried. You are what happens when divinity meets defiance, when compassion learns discernment, when light decides it no longer needs permission to shine. And from here on, your journey belongs entirely to you, written in your own language, guided by your own truth, untouched by their shadows. You are not just surviving, you are radiating, not just existing, you are ascending. And as the world finally adjusts to your brilliance, those who tried to reduce you will be left staring into the glow, realizing too late that they never understood the power of the angel they tried to contain. In a world they found overwhelming, they told themselves you were crafted from mercy alone, a being who existed to soothe their wounds, to absorb their chaos, to forgive their transgressions without question. This label was their shield, their excuse. If you were an angel, then your kindness had to be infinite, your patience boundless, your capacity for forgiveness limitless. It absolved them of responsibility. After all, if you were that pure, then their exploitation couldn't truly harm you, could it? It was a self-serving delusion, a way to justify their own selfishness. They never paused to consider that light, in its purest form, is not weak. It is powerful. It can illuminate, yes, but it can also expose, dissect, and ultimately burn away the illusions they clung to. They mistook your serenity for passivity, your empathy for naivety, your forgiveness for permission. They failed to see the steel beneath the feathers, the controlled fire beneath the calm surface. 2. The strategy of silence. Your silence was never passive. It was a deliberate, calculated strategy, a tactical retreat that allowed you to observe, analyze, and prepare. While they reveled in their perceived victories, thinking your nods and quiet acceptance meant you were defeated, you were meticulously documenting every interaction. You noted the patterns, the way they twisted your words, the specific lies they told, the emotional triggers that made them defensive, the insecurities they masked with arrogance. You cataloged their betrayals not out of resentment, but out of necessity. Each incident became a data point, a lesson in human frailty. You let them believe they were winning because their victory was essential to your strategy. Their confidence in their own dominance was the very thing that would unravel them. You gave them the illusion of control, allowing them to reveal their true natures in the safest environment possible, the one where they thought they were untouchable. This was not naivety. It was intelligence. You were giving them enough rope to hang themselves, waiting for the moment when their own actions would become their downfall. 3. The awakening and evolution. The shift within you wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was a slow, agonizing cracking open, a realization that dawned on you in quiet moments, perhaps while watching the sunrise or reflecting on a particularly painful betrayal. You began to see the world not through the lens of their expectations, but through the lens of truth. You saw the rot in their relationships, the emptiness behind their grandiosity, the fear that drove their cruelty. This awakening was painful, but it was also liberating. You didn't erupt in anger, because anger would have played into their narrative, that you were the emotional, unstable one. Instead, you chose evolution. You pulled back your energy not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. You stopped engaging in their games because they were no longer worthy of your time or emotional labor. You ceased explaining yourself to people who had already decided what to believe. You withdrew your light not to punish them, but to protect yourself, to conserve your strength for what truly mattered. 4. The vacuum and its consequences. The absence you created was not empty. It was a vacuum of accountability. Without your presence, their carefully constructed facades began to collapse. The person who had always been there to mediate conflicts, to absorb their emotional outbursts, to validate their insecurities, was gone. Suddenly, they were forced to confront the chaos they had created themselves. The arguments they had always redirected onto you now had nowhere to go. The lies they told to manipulate you were now directed at each other, and the inconsistencies became glaringly obvious. The person who had always been their emotional crutch was no longer there to prop them up, and they realized with dawning horror that they had been leaning on you far more than they ever admitted. The stability you provided, the quiet assurance, the patient understanding, was not a given. It was a gift they had taken for granted. 5. The warrior angel emerges. Your transformation was not into something cold or cruel. It was into something clear. You became a warrior angel not through anger, but through clarity. You wielded compassion not as a tool for enabling, but as a shield against further harm. You used mercy not to forgive the unforgivable, but to free yourself from the weight of carrying others' burdens. Your heart, once seen as a liability, became your greatest strength. It was a heart that had been tested, scarred, and refined. It could now cut through deception with precision, discern truth from lies with unerring accuracy, and protect itself from further wounds. You set boundaries not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. You became selective not because you had become cynical, but because you had finally learned discernment. You no longer wasted your energy,